Joining us now is Carl Niehaus himself to help us understand what this is for and what we should do with the week ahead. Carl, thanks for your time. Welcome to the program. Your allegiance has been clear for a very long time now. In fact, you've said publicly what you are and not willing to do. Many experts have come forward, though, to say that the former president's defiance of the Constitutional Court order for him to appear at the Zondo Commission tomorrow could actually lead to a constitutional crisis in this country. If it were to come down to that, do you think it's still wise to choose the former president over the constitution of the country?
Well, good morning, and you're quite correct to say that our allegiance is clear. We most definitely are not choosing the former president, President Zuma, over the constitution of the country, and nor does President Zuma do that. President Zuma is very clear that he is committed to the Constitution of South Africa, but is deeply disappointed by the decision of the Constitutional Court to force him to go to the Zondo Commission after he had clearly raised his concerns with regards to the prejudice of Mr. Justice Zondo, and furthermore, that the Constitutional Court is now taking away the fundamental constitutional right of President Zuma to remain silent and not to incriminate himself. These are the issues that President Zuma states he feels very strongly that he cannot allow to happen. And as someone who had, in fact, made a major contribution as one of our most senior leaders to the liberation of our country and also to the creation of our constitutional democracy, he feels principle bound that he must resist this particular ruling of the Constitutional Court and that he will not attend the Zondo Commission. I must emphasize, President Zuma had never said that he is not prepared to attend the Commission of Inquiry into state capture. He raised his concern about the biasness of Mr. Justice Zondo, and that is why he is not prepared to attend the Zondo Commission. It is not that he is in opposition to the Commission of Inquiry into state capture as such.
But I mean, Carl, where do we draw the line, right? It appears all the channels, even followed by the former president himself, seem to disagree about this perceived bias that Zondo has. And we also both know that his appearing at the Zondo Commission with this in the backdrop doesn't necessarily mean that he can't still invoke his right to remain silent so as not to implicate himself in particular ways. In fact, we've seen other witnesses do exactly that. So on the face of it, I mean, a lot of people are still of the view that this is just obfuscation and nothing else. And these other issues are being used ostensibly to just, muddy the waters and further complicate this process. If the president or the former president is as innocent, for lack of a better term, then surely appearing at the commission is exactly what he wants to do to prove that.
You know, one of the things that interests me in the way you as journalists always interview one about this matter of President Zuma is that you always come with a long statement, not just asking a question, but actually participating in the debate. But let me try and answer not only your question, but the long statement. First of all, President Zuma has been very clear that he is not going to appear in front of the Zondo Commission because of the treatment that he had received at the hands of Deputy Judge President Zondo. Now, that is not in any way whatsoever obfuscation. It is a harsh reality that is lived out by the facts. Secondly, in a recent interview on SABC, the former public protector, Thuli Madonsela, stated unequivocally that the Zondo Commission had been set up specifically to deal with President Zuma. And in fact, that there would be no commission of inquiry into state capture if it wasn't for this targeting of President Zuma. Now, what do you expect President Zuma to do under the circumstances? Is he supposed to accept this kind of erosion of his rights? Is he supposed to accept this kind of targeting of himself? And we are not choosing against the Constitution. We are demanding that our Constitution, and I myself had contributed to bringing about this change in South Africa, and President Zuma had contributed much more than me. We're demanding that this Constitution, with all its principal positions, including the right to remain silent, must be instituted. And may I point out to you that it is laughable to say that President Zuma's right to remain silent is still applicable when the Constitutional Court said the only time when President Zuma can actually invoke that right to remain silent if he will actually explain why he is invoking that right. And obviously, it means that in that explanation, he will already declare what he is concerned about. And therefore, the issue of remaining silent is mute in this case.
I've given you a long time to explain this at the risk of being accused again of entering the debate. So let me just ask plainly then. We're getting reports now that the ANC top six is actually mulling over going to the former president and convincing him to appear before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. Do you imagine the former president conceding to that if this is true?
Well, I'm not going to imagine anything. I'm not going to get involved in speculation. I'm going to tell you what President Zuma told us as the MKMVA NEC delegation on Thursday. And he stated unequivocally that he will not attend the Zondo Commission, and he gave us his reasons. Okay. Those reasons are set out in the statement that he issued on the 1st of February this month, and he expanded on them. And right at the beginning of this interview, I gave you again those reasons, that the president believes firmly that his constitutional rights are being compromised by the ruling of the Constitutional Court. And in addition to that, that while he was busy with an application to appeal the decision of Mr. Justice Zondo not to recuse himself, Mr. Justice Zondo rushed through the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture to the Constitutional Court and got a ruling that President Zuma must appear. Strangely enough, the Constitutional Court did not take into consideration that President Zuma was busy with an application of appeal against the refusal to recuse himself by Mr. Justice Zondo. And even more strangely enough, Mr. Justice Zondo did not take that application into consideration. But that seems to be just the way he operates. He treats President Zuma in a manner that is totally different from any of the other persons who appear in front of the commission. He even tries to exert from witnesses whether there's not possibly some involvement of President Zuma, even if they don't mention President Zuma. He had public press conferences to attack President Zuma when he was ill, when he could not appear in front of the commission, while he treated others, such as Mr. Pravin Gordhan, who also failed to appear in front of the commission at the time that he was supposed to be there, with kid gloves and with the utmost respect. Right. That's the reality that the president faces. That's the reality that you as journalists so often try to deny.
Well, and you know what? The reality is also that you're going to need to substantiate these, and sadly, we don't have time for you to do that right now. What is interesting, though, and what must be stated, is there are just so many people who disagree with that on various fronts, and that also is certainly an issue to be addressed. But before then, though, you know, you'd also mentioned that you will... Well, I mean, let me finish. I allowed you to speak, which is, you know, very intentionally so, because of the defense you've already taken. But you have also publicly stated that you're willing to protect the former president at all costs. Does that also include, dare I say, barring the NPA from doing its work, because we know that there's a real possibility that it might be roped in if the former president doesn't appear tomorrow?
We didn't say that. We said we will protect the president, and part of the process of protecting the president will be for us to take the reasons why President Zuma is refusing to appear in front of the Zondo Commission, to the branches of the African National Congress, and to the masses of the people of South Africa throughout the country.
But what does protecting the former
MKMVA
president
is now
at
clearly
all costs actually mean? What does protecting the former president at all costs actually entail? That's the nub of my question.
Can I finish my sentence first?
Go ahead.
My sentence is that we will continue to bring that message to the majority of people in South Africa so that we can counter this kind of biased message that comes out from the media. Protection means that we will stand with President Zuma to the fullest. We are not going to engage in speculative debate about a standoff at the gates of Nkandla. That is a narrative you want to create. That is not our narrative. The fact that there are members of uMkhonto weSizwe Military Veterans Association going to Nkandla to show their support for him is a perfectly acceptable situation. On Thursday, when we were there were a platoon of MKMVA members in full camouflage uniform, forming a guard of honor out of respect for President Zuma and acknowledging that their leadership were visiting him. Those are the messages that we are conveying. We are saying that it would be foolhardy and really wrong to arrest President Zuma. That can plunge this country into instability, not because we want it, but because our analysis as soldiers who have got the tools to analyze these things tells us that this could be the situation that could develop. Why do you now want to put me into a narrative of violence, as if we are the provokers of violence, while this foolhardy approach and push for arresting President Zuma will cause the instability? Not us. We want to see peace. We want to see unity in the African National Congress. We want to see a country and a political party in the African National Congress that can truly serve the people of this country. We do not want to see this kind of instability that is caused by this foolhardy approach to arrest President Zuma under the circumstances where his rights has been compromised, as I've tried to explain to you for the last 10 minutes.
Right, Carl Niehaus, I have to jab in there and thank you for your time. That is the perspective that you have and the perspective you're, of course, entitled to project. And we'll have to leave it just on that note. Certainly appreciate it. Carl Niehaus is the spokesperson of the MKMVA. And of course, again, those moments certainly leaving a lot to be desired once the framing is such that there are very clear victims and clear perpetrators in this. And that's why listening in on that conversation was Ralph Mathekga, who's a political analyst you must be accustomed to by now. Ralph Mathekga also joining us via our video link. So Ralph, I know you were listening in quite closely on that. And I'll start perhaps by addressing the elephant in the room. We as a platform have also come under fire on various places, including social media, for even giving people like Carl Niehaus a voice, because according to some people, they're discredited to an extent that whatever narrative they push shouldn't be legitimized by even having a conversation with them. Your take on that?
Well, Ayanda, good morning to your viewers at home. I think it is very difficult to intelligibly engage with the views that were just expressed by Carl Niehaus. And I say difficult to intelligibly engage. It is not, I did not hear someone who is bringing people into the debate. This is someone who is just throwing in actually threats, threatening state institutions. They are acting like a militia. They are becoming belligerent to a point where I think it is a shame on the ANC. There is no legal provision in our constitution that actually allows them to say the things that they are saying. As far as I'm aware, in our society, our laws, our conventions, and our principles, there is no legal provision that says someone has to opt out. This is why people get irritated when they see stuff like this on television, because people tend to think, what is this? I mean, on what confines now are we? What are the rules of the game now? Are we now encouraging militia, people who are saying they will protect, they will prevent the police from carrying out law and order? This is unprecedented and very difficult to engage with.
Yeah, we also live in quite a pluralist environment, right? The idea that the public domain is meant to be where there's a charged exchange of ideas, etc., etc. It almost feels, though, that there is a line to be drawn, and the debate now is about where that line ought to be drawn. Because depending on how you see the MKMVA, they represent a people, a constituency with sentiments that are very closely aligned to that of the former president. Does that not give ground for a ventilation of their ideas in some respects too?
They have a right to ventilate their ideas. They have a right to take a position in society. But I'm not engaging with you when I'm threatening to burn your house on a debate, on a table. There's a point where, and I'm not saying this is what they're doing, but certainly their language, I mean, they cannot even respond to you how they are planning to carry out this undertaking, that they will prevent the arrest of President Jacob Zuma. Are they going to approach the United Nations? Are they going to The Hague? It will be better. It will be possible for me to engage with them if they were saying that, look, this violation of human rights is going to the United Nations. We are petitioning the United Nations. You can intelligibly engage with people who remain within the system. But people who use the system, and once they've exhausted the system and they are not happy with the result, they say that, by the way, we are kind of tired of this thing. We are opting out. How do you deal with that?
Of course, in the backdrop, we've seen instances where the former president has actually spoken up about the developments in the past few hours, past few days, etc. In fact, just yesterday, according to the Sunday Times, the former president was attending KZN Deputy Speaker Mishek Khatebe's funeral and took the opportunity, as he was speaking, to essentially paint this picture of him being the victim in everything that's happening. Perhaps no surprises there, but it's happening at a funeral of a fellow cadre, so to speak. Some people framing this as the last kick of a dying horse. How do you see it?
I see hypocrisy, because President Jacob Zuma has got the right to freedom of expression, but it comes with obligation. He has a right to express himself and craft how his legal troubles or how his political journey has to be understood. He can express that. But all of these things are happening within a constitutional democracy where we respect the right of each other. And within that obligation, within that rights, those privileges, there is also an obligation to live and to be sanctioned by this entity called the Constitution. We are part of a collective as a society. So you don't just cherry pick and say, I like this principle, I enjoy freedom of expression. And when someone says to me that, but here your exercise of freedom of expression is no longer to the interest of the common good, we need to assess the basis of your reasoning and so forth. You then say that, no, I'm not going to oblige, I'm not going to abide by that. That is hypocrisy. And its lack of constitutionalism, the ANC here has to lead.
Yeah. And in fact, I would go so far as to say that the ANC's leadership will be on show this week, because outside of, call it the apex of this moment, tomorrow, when the former president is meant to appear at the Zondo Commission, on Friday, Secretary General S. Magashule is meant to make his second court appearance for the corruption case that he faces in the Free State. How ought the ANC leadership respond to the week ahead, considering, as the cliche goes, all eyes will be on them?
You know, unfortunately, they are confronted with only two options. There is no middle ground in relation to this. This week, and I think perhaps in the next month or so, in relation to these matters, the ANC has to decide whether it is going to be a platform through which to strengthen the rules and to strengthen state institutions. Remember, Ayanda, the ANC is in government. I'm not talking about a small pressure group trying to raise funding elsewhere to pressure the state. I'm talking about a political party that has got a resounding victory, that is in government, has been democratically elected, and therefore has an obligation to protect the integrity of state institutions. Because it is only through the integrity of state institutions that the ANC can implement its agenda, including the radical economic transformation or whichever agenda it is. It requires legitimacy of institution to be implemented in government. So this week, the ANC will have to decide. It protect the integrity of the institution and take the high road on this issue and actually show leadership, or it becomes a platform through which constitutional delinquency get launched in South Africa. There is no middle ground. This is not an issue that can be deferred to further consultation. They need to take a firm position on this.
Yeah, and consultation is what we've been kind of forced to believe is actually taking place within the ANC-NEC meeting this weekend. This step-aside resolution, I mean, do you feel it's causing more harm than good within the ANC? I mean, did the party actually take the wrong route at the fork when they had to decide whether or not to adopt this, considering how much just even internal turmoil it's caused?
You know, in principle, the step-aside resolution, it indicates that the ANC is aware of the extent to which the integrity of the party has actually suffered because of the behavior of some members of the party. And the step-aside resolution was meant to say that, look, step aside and you can be able to deal with your issues. But we know what is it that they are trying to deal with. The difficulty here, Ayanda, is that they are now dealing with the step-aside resolution as a question that is technically not clear. You know, who is supposed to step aside, when? And if I step aside, what about 15 other people whose names have only crossed a report twice? Do you have to be mentioned 15 times in a report of impropriety to step aside? All of these things are brought in to obfuscate a very clear issue which should be dealt with in a very simple criteria. When an ANC member is facing investigation by state institution in relation to allegations of impropriety, they can step aside. That is a clear criteria that they should have implemented a long way back. But now they are seeking legal advice. And the issue here is that the lack of clarity that exists within the ANC regarding this matter is now, Ayanda, brought within the state. I mean, look at what is happening with President Jacob Zuma's matter. The ANC is now discussing to persuade. There's no room for persuasion. The law is very clear. Now, because the party is not clear, it tends to believe the country is not clear. That is quite unfair for South Africans.
Yeah, and as irony would have it, or however you want to see it, today actually marks, I think it's about 3 years to the day that former President Jacob Zuma actually resigned as the President of the Republic and by extension the President of the ANC. It almost feels that, you know, the kind of anxiety, call it instability, sense of unknowingness that existed then exists probably in the same intensity now.
Well, the reality is that there is what I call the politics of President Jacob Zuma, the way in which the ANC, I think, was configured to a certain extent, or part of the ANC was configured to a certain extent because of the influence of President Jacob Zuma personally, his politics, and so forth. And I think, Ayanda, that type of politics no longer depend on the person. Whether President Jacob Zuma does whatever he does, whether he goes to the commission and whatsoever, the politics of President Jacob Zuma has become an autonomous politics that will run within the ANC. So a year since he resigned, they are still sitting to discuss him. I think that 2 years down the line, you are still going to see within, or maybe even a decade down the line, you might see within the ANC that remnants of that type of anti-establishment politics, that politics where factionalism tend to be nurtured within the party. And it is an irreversible development within the ANC. Unfortunately, they can no longer live without factionalism.
Ralph Mathekga, great getting your insights on this. I really appreciate it. Ralph Mathekga is a political analyst joining us there via our video line. So there you have it, almost what feels like as much perspective on this incredibly contentious issue as one can get in a matter of minutes. The point is to present the status quo or the lay of the land as it is, and you decide.